My name is Becky Ziegler, and I grew up in Salem, Ohio, and with two parents that were musicians, an older brother that was a musician, and lots of community involvement and parents who were very well known. So it was a little hard to get away with anything any place. And eventually went off to Baldwin-Wallace. I thought I was going to be an oboe major. And I was for 1/4 until I realized that I had no idea what theory was about. And I really didn't care about all that long, drawn-out lectures on history of musicians, etc. At which point in time I switched to psychology and eventually became a special ed teacher, which I did for 33 years. Okay.
Okay.
I'm Bourbon Ziegler. I was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. Have 2 brothers and a sister. My oldest brother passed away 2 years ago. And my parents was from Bessemer, Alabama and Verbena, Alabama. And I attended public schools here in Cleveland. Graduated from John Adams High School. Went to college out in Oklahoma at Panhandle A&M. 1/2 year. and I transferred to Baldwin-Wallace College. There I got a degree in health and physical education. I played basketball there for 4 years.
That's great. Just reset this, setting this up. That was a great start. Okay, so describe, like, where are we right now?
We are in University Heights in our living room, surrounded by favorite family pictures and a few mementos. Behind you is a guitar that belonged to my grandfather. He apparently was in some sort of a string band, which I didn't find out until just a couple years ago. And a lot of the other things, there's some artwork in here that's by my good friend Susan, who's a ceramicist. And lots of photographs and an old radio that was my grandmother's, and some things are just hard to let go of, you know.
And we'll circle back to your childhood a little bit and to some of your family history. But describe how you guys met?
We met at Baldwin-Wallace College in an intro to psychology class.
Tell the truth. And you were wearing?
I was wearing pajamas because I had just came back from a road trip playing basketball. And that was an 8 o'clock in the morning class. So just went with my pajama tops on and a pair of pants and tennis shoes.
Wasn't a very good introduction.
And what year was this?
1965, right?
66.
Yeah, something around
So
there.
did he put the moves on you? What was his
No,
what was his
at
opening
first
line?
he was just a rather kind of, what is that guy wearing? Sort of reaction. And then it was clear he hadn't probably really read too much of the day's assignment because he was having a little trouble with the answering questions. And he was trying to get acquainted because he figured maybe I knew some answers. So it took a while. Yes.
I was just feeling her out in class and see how she actually studied.
You were doing what?
Feeling you out.
You want to rephrase that?
I think you're the one that's taking this to some place that it shouldn't go. I think he's just saying he was.
Yeah. Okay.
So how did the relationship evolve?
Well, let's see. I actually was dating someone else at the time, so that broke off. And I do recall being at a basketball game with some friends of mine and asking if that was really that player's name. I do remember that. Was his name really Bourbon, or was there some other reason for him being called that? So I guess we were probably, juniors?
Juniors.
I think we were juniors going into our senior year. And so, I don't know, we just did things together, went to some parties together, things like that.
Was there a first time that you actually asked her out, or you just it was sort of organic and you just started hanging out more?
That's a good question. I have no idea.
Yeah, I took her out for her birthday.
Oh, yeah. You did. to, what was the name?
Castle de Baron.
Oh, in Berea, yeah. That was a hangout for the BW students.
Yeah.
Okay. So, you know, you said you noticed him at a basketball game as well. Was it exciting to date an athlete in college? Was it something that you could care less about? You just liked him, or was there some sort of excitement?
You know, honestly, it was a little out of my league because even though the fraternity that all the athletes were in was not integrated, they invited the African American players and football players to the parties. So I might have gone to one or two of those, but I wasn't comfortable in that kind of atmosphere at all, actually. So I do remember doing some hiking because, you know, Rocky River Reservation is all over the place. So we did some things like that. And graduation day, I mean, we saw each other and dated for a while, and then I had the feeling that this wasn't going to go very well, so we broke up, and then we got back together and finally took a deep breath and took him home to my parents, and my grandmother was still living.
No way.
So of all the people that I thought would have a fit, I thought it would be Grandma. She's like, oh, hello. That was the end of it. And my mom was the peacemaker in the family, and my dad was not happy.
Mm-hmm.
So it was awkward for a while.
But it sounds like, based on where you grew up, that maybe that things went as well as you could have hoped.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Better, probably. Yeah.
What about you? I mean, was there any trepidation with the relationship, or you just were like, whatever, I'm Bourbon, I'm going to do what I'm going to do?
Basically, my my mother wasn't too pleased, but eventually she came around and said Becky was one of her best daughter-in-laws she ever had.
There have been a few.
Yes.
Yeah.
And like you said, I was going to do what I wanted to do, period.
Yeah.
Was there any attraction to Becky in that she was not like into athletes, that she was from a sort of a different sort of pocket of college? Were you intrigued? What were the things about Becky that intrigued you?
Well, I liked her because in that psych class, I came in again late. And they gave a pop quiz. And I tried to look on her paper.
He did.
And she covered it up. And surprisingly, I got a better grade than she did on the paper.
You probably just found somebody else's paper
No.
to look at.
So you guys broke up, and then how'd you get back together? What was the process there?
Do you want to tell him about the letter he wrote? Because I still have it.
No, I forgot about that.
He wrote me quite a letter, and it was enough to change my mind that maybe this would work, or we could go ahead with our plans. And eventually we got engaged. We had my parents to the apartment and about set them on fire with a fondue pot dinner. He went and bought the wrong stuff to put under the pot, so the flames were licking around. And my father, who really truly had a very good sense of humor, just kind of kept cracking jokes about, well, if you don't like us, you could just tell us, trying to stick his fork in among the flames. So that was not a very auspicious beginning for things, for as far as our activities together. But we got around finally. We got engaged and started planning a small wedding. And I thought we would get married in the chapel in our home church, where my father was the office manager, secretary, music director, and he had been there for years and years. And he was very close to the minister at the time, who said no, he would not marry us because he did not want to offend my father. And that was probably the worst. And all the things that we were anticipating going wrong, I think that hurt me more than anything. As it turned out, his son-in-law married us. And we got married in the chapel at Baldwin Wallace. And it wasn't a big wedding, but it was enough. And people from Salem came. My parents' best friends came. And, everything was fine. Now, when it came to the reception, that was held in the Methodist Church Hall just good old-fashioned, egg salad, sandwiches, that kind of thing. My parents didn't drink, weren't going to drink, and weren't about to pay for alcohol. So that was, you have to accept some things. They were helping us out with this. So
Then my sister, after that, we had a reception over her house with everything, alcohol, music,
yeah.
dancing.
Yeah, well, Mom and Dad, they came for a while.
Yeah.
They came for a while. The best part of that actually was walking outside to leave. We had all of our gifts in a sheet, so we looked like giant Santa Clauses all dressed up. And we get back to his car, and there are feet sticking out of one of the bushes, and it was who had been my apartment roommate, had a little too much to drink. So
And she passed out.
she passed out in the bushes. Then we went on. We were living in the Americana, which is one of the high rises in Euclid along the lake. And we get back there, and we're coming out of the parking lot. He's in a tux. I'm in my little wedding gown. We're carrying bags of gifts and sheets, and we run into some people that we kind of knew. And, the whole thing had a lot of humor to it, as weddings go. No big guffaws or anything like that, but just the fact that little things go wrong that you kind of remember made it funny, actually. My dad would not walk me down the aisle. All right, my brother did. It's okay, he played the organ. He was happy doing that. I knew that's where he was comfortable. Sometimes you really learn in life that you're not always going to get what you want, but you have to take into account the other person. At least he came.
Yeah.
So what's your mentality at that point? Are you, you're probably feeling like things are going okay, right? Like, even her father, like, you're probably like, are you that upset about it? Are you sort of respectful of, like, that he's trying at all? Like, what were you guys?
I figured if he didn't want to do it, great. He played the music. Her brother walked her down the aisle. And I was the mindset, if nobody walked her down the aisle, one of my brothers could have done it.
Yeah, my brother.
Or my father would have done it.
Yeah, so it was fine. I mean, it's what life is, right? You don't just get everything you want.
But in the end, her dad really liked me.
Yeah. It was, and then grandkids do help situations like that.
Oh, yeah.
The Bourbon Jr. was the first baby. My brother is older than I am, so he had children that were elementary and maybe, around elementary age when we got married. And so, about 3 or 4 years later, then we had our first child, so that helped too.
And her brother and his wife, they lived out of state. And we're here in Cleveland. Took us, hour to drive to Salem.
Yeah, a lot of back and forth.
Yeah.
So you guys get married, and where do you guys settle? What's the next move after you guys get married?
Well, we stayed in the apartment for a while, and then he was working as a ranger for the Metro Parks at the time, and they owned some houses over on Chardon Road down near Euclid, over basically in the Euclid Creek Reservation, but away from the one that everybody thinks of. So we lived there for a couple years. Bourbon Jr. was born when we lived there. And then when we decided to buy a house, which is this one, we started looking around for houses. So
What year was that?
Also an experience. Bourbon Jr. turned 2 that year, so
1977.
77.
So what was it like trying to buy a house in University Heights in 1977?
They was trying to
I think the term is
steer us to this section of the town, or, well, we can't show you this section.
Did they say that straight out?
No.
No,
Oh,
but
no. We figured it out.
figured it out because we, had a real estate company helping us. We looked in the paper too, and we said, well, why not here? Oh, we don't know. Then you sit down and figure it out. Yeah, they know why. They're steering us to,
Down the Noble Road area, closer to East Cleveland.
yeah.
They kept showing us things over there. And we looked at one house, which I'm so glad we didn't buy, over on Superior, right across from Kane Park. It was a nice big old house. That's not the one that had water in the basement?
Yes.
But in the long run, we changed realtors, and then we started looking, because we wanted to be in an integrated neighborhood. We didn't have a load of money, and we weren't going to buy one of the big mansions around here. And so this was perfect, because when we moved in here, there were all kinds of kids and young families. The African American couple that bought on this street first are still living 4 doors down from us. Mm-hmm. So, but it was much more integrated at that point in time, and lots of kids. So, and a school nearby. So, it's just been fine. We're still here.
Well, that's great. So that eventually worked out. It's funny because that's when my parents were looking for a house too. And they actually, I was born on Eddington, at Mayfield and Eddington, like in between Superior. It was sort of a hippie enclave back then. But then they bought on Scarborough. And I wonder if by the house my parents bought, I wonder if they wouldn't show you guys, like right next to Fairfax on
No, we didn't get shown any houses in that area.
We looked someplace, and I have this vague memory of being told we probably wouldn't be comfortable there.
That was off of Fairmount, up near the Shaker Heights border.
Yeah, someplace over there. They didn't think we'd be comfortable there.
So, your kids went to, so Bourbon's born in what, 74?
75.
75.
Okay. And then Alicia's born in
78.
78.
Mm-hmm.
And they go to what school?
Northwood.
They went to Northwood.
Northwood.
So
Northwood, and then Alicia went to Roxborough because they closed Northwood.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And they gave us a choice with schools, so she chose Roxborough, and Bourbon went to Canterbury.
And then Wiley.
All right. That's right.
Then the high school.
Right. And what do you remember about each of them as kids?
Bourbon, he was everywhere. He was energetic. He was athletic. He liked t-ball. He ran track. He played Little League every summer, all the way through elementary school, up and through middle school, I think. And, if there was a playground, he was the one up on the top of the climbing bars. We had young next-door neighbors at the time with no kids. And so Joe and Bourbon Jr. were yelling for me one day to come and see where they were. Now, Joe was an adult. He had put steps on a tree so that they could climb up together and sit on the garage roof, on Joe's garage roof. And Bourbon just thought that was fabulous. And the same tree, we had a family behind us. Bessie and Gloria lived behind us for years. You probably at least know Gloria, I think. And Alicia was over there playing, and Bourbon was spying on them from a tree branch and fell into the backyard. Now, he wasn't hurt, but I mean, that's the kind of kid he was. School was, all right, I have to go.
Yeah, school,
You're gonna make
I have
me
to go, and I'll make the best of it.
But let me say, and I say this all the time, the music program in this school system, which he started playing saxophone, 4th or 5th grade. And I mean, that's what he did. And he found a niche, and, he just loved it. He loved the bands. He loved the band at the high school, he all the way through. Alicia, school, she didn't struggle quite as much with things as Bourbon had. Things that he was very good at, but he wasn't all that interested. And he was the one that I had to go up to the school and check on homework and things like that, but still and yet, Mr. Bain, we give Mr. Bain a lot of credit. He was the band director at the time for kind of guiding him the right direction, I think.
He was great.
Yes.
Alicia she kind of traveled her own beat too. She would get bored in class when things that they were doing she knew about, and would talk back to teachers.
Or just talk.
Yes.
Just talk, probably.
One of the funniest things was her Spanish class.
In high school?
Yeah. She
I don't
and
know
the
if it was
Spanish
funny.
teacher didn't get together
It was the
because,
student teacher.
and she said, how could she teach me Spanish when she was Polish?
Or something like that. Eric Foreman's dad was one of the principals up there. I finally called him one. It was a student teacher. She called me every week at work. Every week.
At least she
We
would be
tried
in the hallway.
everything. And I said, would you please go and see if you can figure out what's going on? And he was laughing when he called me back. He says, well, she's sitting in the hall. Like, oh, well. She waited till her junior, senior year to decide, But they were both, they both had their skills and talents, and we knew that, and that's where you go with things if you're smart. Oh.
And was the bourbon, like being in the music, was that something exciting for you?
Oh,
especially?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He was in the, that was about the same time that the Institute of Music started the Youth Wind Symphony. So he was in that. And that was an audition sort of thing. So that was a big step for him. And I think he really would have liked to major in music, and he did. He did go to Cleveland State, and he was a music major, and he had scholarships and things. But as anything else, as I found out, it requires a lot of other classes. So I think that by him making some decisions on his own, that was the right thing to do, because eventually he found his own way. You can only, as you will find out, you can't
He
always.
would come home and say, Dad, why do I have to take physical education in college when all I want to do is play music?
Oh, that's right. Yes, that was quite a discussion.
Yes, well, they want you to have a rounded education.
Musicians got to know how to balance their bank account, right?
Yeah. Howie Smith was the jazz and saxophone instructor at Cleveland State at that time. And we actually saw him last weekend at one of the Chamberfest concerts that we were at, and he and Bourbon had a little conversation together and then, talked with each other. So, it was fine.
And Bourbon's choices now in his adult life, he's trying to keep music in his life, clearly.
Absolutely.
Do you think
Yeah.
that's a coincidence that he's with Julie? Yeah.
That is one of those things that you sit back and go, wow. Because if you would know him and then you would know her, you would think this would never work. And her mother actually said that at their wedding, having been around them for a while, and yet she could see how they work things out and talk things over, and they're really able to let each other be who they are. And I think that's what it works. He supports her in every way and vice versa. And she even goes to his heavy metal. She does. He's found a group of people in Minneapolis, and he's the singer-screamer. And, he loves it. It's what he likes to do. And so it works. And as far as her career goes, right now she's in St. Paul as the principal cellist in the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra, and in a way it's made their lives a little easier because she's not gone as much, and it's a steady schedule as opposed to the soloing when you're running all over the world looking for getting.
Yeah, when you thought about who Bourbon could end up with, like, she probably wasn't the prototype. But isn't that sort of how the Ziegler's roll? Like,
no, really. Just, no, let's go down this. We don't want to go down this road. That's boring. We're going to go over here, Yeah, well, they met at one of her, it was one of his best friends.
Big John introduced him to take her out.
Well, no, but they met at a party. He had a party for his fiancée, who was also graduating from CIM. So that's how they met. Bourbon was at that, so that's how they met. And eventually he moved to New York, and they were together there for a while. And finally he got up the nerve to ask her to marry him. The little encouragement from Mom and Alicia. And I think maybe Julie at some point.
And then things seem to be working okay for Alicia and JJ.
Oh,
absolutely.
What do you remember about their relationship? And I know JJ obviously was in pursuit. from a young age?
They were
Third
in
grade?
was it third or
Third grade.
third grade class pictures. They're both in a red and black plaid shirt. One on one end of the class, the other on the other end. And I don't think they knew one another well
That was
then.
the funniest picture.
Yeah.
So they got reacquainted after they were both out of college. I think they met up again at somebody else's party, same kind of thing, and it went from there. So we are the people that say, "Oh my gosh, we love our daughter-in-law, we love our son-in-law." If somebody had said, "Go pick out their spouses," I don't think we would have done any better than what they did on their own without us. How about that?
And yeah, Alicia and JJ have sort of settled in as Cleveland Heights, the next generation. Right?
Absolutely,
So it's
absolutely.
kind of funny to see where they're at right now.
Yeah.
And what are the things that when you think about your grandkids, what are the things that stick out to you?
Energy. Oliver is inquisitive, asks questions, wants to understand things, pretty friendly, comfortable around people, and we've helped take care of him since he was a newborn. And then Abraham is his own little guy, and he's not as outgoing at first, but both of them are, very smart and very adorable and fun to be around. And it's kind of, I like to be on the go with kids, and I always did a lot of things, well, we both did with the children. So it's kind of fun to have kids to take to the pool. We're going to the beach tomorrow. We love all the museums around here. And so
My brother have renamed them as the SEAL team.
Navy SEAL.
Navy SEAL team.
Well, he was here one day when they were both here. And when your kids are kind of close together in age and they bicker and
Everything. And Abraham, to get his way, he want to attack Oliver. And Oliver is, I'm the big brother. No, I'm not going to do anything because the parents are sitting around.
Well, I think we had that big family party on the 1st, and that inflated pool out there because it was 90-some degrees, and we had our own 2 grandkids and great nephews coming, and 2 of whom were teenagers. The other one's a couple years older than Oliver. And then someone else came over and brought his daughter, and I mean, they spent the entire afternoon running from the driveway across the grass and throwing themselves into that pool. So that it was a high energy afternoon and evening.
We think it's funny that JJ's the judge, and that to us, of all of the kids that we got in this group, that Oliver seems like is a stickler for the rules and what's right and wrong.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's very intense about right and wrong. I think that's funny that his dad is the judge. I don't know if you guys get that.
He was a big supporter for his dad being a judge when he was running for judge.
He was great. I love that photograph of him in art class and talked to other kids into making campaign signs.
Well, that's great. So things are good for you guys. Do you guys have any goals moving forward? Are you going to stay in University Heights, or what's your retirement aspirations?
Well, we just came back. When we like to travel, and we know that we have wonderful friends in New Mexico that we spent a week with in April, and Minneapolis, and I have a brother in Rochester, and we still have some places that we'd like to go see. As far as staying here, I think what we've seen here actually is when we first moved in, I mentioned, a lot of young families, a lot of kids to play with. Everybody was either in the public school or Jesu, or we did have someone ask us what Presbyterians were doing in this neighborhood because everybody was either Jesu or Jewish. And then there was a period of time when the housing market kind of went down and things weren't so good. But more and more lately, there are a lot of young couples moving in, and you really want to see that. So
young couples with kids, young kids.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
nice to hear young kids running around playing now.
And the college students down the street have settled down. The school and the city got together on that, so that's made a difference. These huge duplexes on the corner, particularly the one across from us, had been a huge problem for years. I didn't care who he rented to. It was awful. And he finally seems to have found tenants that come and go at normal times and have kids that come outside and play, and so that's what you want to see. So we like it here, but at some point in time, an apartment would be okay by me.
You don't want to live in New Mexico for a couple months a year, or didn't
No,
No.
no. Our family's all here. Mm-mm. No
And
thanks.
out in New Mexico, where they love that, you live out there by yourself with the animals.
Yeah, it's very rural. Well, now, as you see, though, we have gardens. I'm quite a gardener. So that would be the one thing that would keep me here till I probably can't do it anymore. So,
Anything else about your careers? I know you were at the Metro Parks for a little while, and you were at Budweiser or Anheuser-Busch for a while.
Yes, sir.
How did you end up at Anheuser-Busch?
When I left the park system, I was doing nothing. And one of my friend's daughters worked there. And she said they was looking for a merchandiser. And this was just something, you go and decorate the stores. So I went and applied for that job. And the guy that I interviewed with, we sat and talked for about an hour and a half. And getting up to leave, I said, oh, and by the way, when will you let me know if I have this job? Oh, he said, oh, that was about an hour ago. So I started as a merchandiser and ended up being a territory manager. And I worked there for 23 years.
yeah. So then when I switched out of music, and I sing in two choirs. I play bells in our church bell choir, so I haven't let that part of it go. But I took a job teaching special ed in Cleveland, and so I taught there for a few years, and then I took one maternity leave with Bourbon Jr. and went back to work, and then when I got pregnant with Alicia, I took a maternity leave, and then I decided to stay home for a while. So I did early childhood here through the Cleveland Heights, and I actually was hired at Park Synagogue, the old Park Synagogue, the big one here in the Heights, and taught their preschool classes for a while. And then eventually I needed to go back full time. So I took a job with the Positive Education Program, and that is an agency that treats children with behavioral and emotional disabilities. So these are kids that have been pulled out of public school. And I was there for 20-some years.
Sounds
As
intense.
a classroom, I was in a classroom, and then I took a case manager's position, which means you're working with families and agencies and, trying to tie everything together, reintegrate kids that are ready to go back to public school, that kind of thing. And that's a kind of job where we used to just look at each other and shake our heads sometimes, because if you don't have a sense of humor and a very strong sense of self, they're going to get you. And really, it's a kind of job where you have to look real hard to see where the potential is and encourage your parents to change. That's the key. So it was not what I thought it was going to be, because I took over the youngest class, and I'm thinking, 6 to 8 year olds, how bad can that be? Surprise. So that was a learn by the seat of your pants job. But my co-workers, we are the best of friends, and I was the first one to retire, and then somebody else, and then the last of that group retired this year. So we're looking at little camp outs and wine and whatever. Good friends, though. You make good friends through jobs like that.
All right, so now a little bit more. I'll let you guys go. So, what do you remember about your family history? What were your grandparents' names? What were your parents' names? And tell me about growing up in Salem.
Growing up in Salem, a small town. Like I said, my parents were very involved in the community, in the music world. My mom taught piano. So even though she was a stay-at-home mom, she taught piano after school every day. My dad was the church organist, I already said this, and he taught piano and organ as well. Very involved in the Rotary Club. Both of them were very involved in community things. My father's parents were there. So I had grandparents and for a while an aunt and uncle that were there. But you know what it was? There were 3 or 4 elementary schools, and we all ended up in the same junior high at that time, in the same high school. So you didn't know everybody, but it really had a small town atmosphere. It certainly wasn't integrated. There were African American families. There was an AME Zion Church there. But overall, it was just a small town with a lot to do and a pool and Saturday night sock hops and, rock and roll and that kind of thing. I think the thing that I remember the most was that my brother loved cars, but he was also a very good musician. And there was this battle going on for a while. Did he want to be a mechanic or did he want to go to music school? Which is quite a diverse thing. And I think it was always assumed that I would major in music, and I think I felt that way too. I played oboe from 4th grade on. And I loved to play the oboe, but the rest of it was a little too intense. But Salem, it was a nice town. My mother's family was from the North Canton area. And so we actually have some immigration papers from the Schmidts, which became Smith, and the Schlotes that became Sloats, So I spent a lot of time with my grandma there.
From Germany?
Bavaria originally, and Germany, and on my dad's side, mostly England, a little bit of Ireland in there.
And where was your dad from?
My dad was born in Salem.
Mm-hmm.
My mother was born in North Canton. They met at music school. They both went to the same music college. So that's where they met. Well, Dana School of Music is now part of Youngstown State. Mm-hmm. Originally, it was a private music college started by somebody named something Dana. I forget his name. Mm-hmm. And so that's where they met.
And what were your grandparents' names?
Taylor on one side and Smith on the other.
What were the first names?
Oh, okay. Dora and Fred Smith. Mm-hmm. And then Isabel was my great-grandmother. And I didn't really know her, but I know about her because she apparently was a fairly formidable person. Mm-hmm. And my father's parents' names were Lillian and Emmer Taylor. And then her maiden name was Spencer. Okay. And so they were all from the Salem area, and then before that, West Virginia.
Mm-hmm. Any lost love boyfriends in high school? What was your high school life?
Oh yeah,
like?
I dated probably the most serious one was a boy that was a track star and the drum major in the band, but we had quite a group of friends that we were the band nerds. Mm-hmm. And the musicians, and we didn't care. We had a good time. So eventually, we went our separate ways. And I dated a couple other guys for a while too, but yeah. One guy was a drummer. Really liked him. Something about drummers. Did you take up the drums? Oh,
no.
So what do you remember about your childhood?
I had 2 brothers and a sister. And the brothers, we all played together. Mm-hmm. And my sister, she was a sister. We watched after her. And my mother and father, my mother she stayed at home. She didn't have a job. She was an at-home mom. My father worked construction. And like earlier, he was born in Verbena, Alabama. And my mother was born in Bessemer, Alabama. And they met in Bessemer. And my grandfather was named Frank.
Which side?
My father's side. And his father was named Frank. And then Frank's father was named Dan. And Dan was a slave that came over from Togo or Benin, Africa. And on my mother's side, her father was named Cleve Staden. He was born in Bessemer, Alabama. And and I'm following their lines back through now, doing ancestry. And on my father's side, I've followed it all the way back to England. I still got some other leaves on ancestry to look at.
Tell them what you did every summer.
Every summer I went that school was out, say June 1st. We spent the rest 3 months in Alabama with my grandparents.
What was it? What years was that?
All the years I was in elementary school,
So what is it? The 40s? Is it the 50s?
the 50s.
50s. So what was it like for a northern kid to go spend his summer in Alabama in the 50s?
Very shocking.
Right.
My grandmother used to, well, everybody at the stores knew that Miss Beale grandkids from the north was there because we would go to the store and ask for a pop. And there, yeah, these Miss Beale's kids, their drinks.
Or soda. Did they say
No,
soda?
drinks.
Oh, you know what? Now this is, because her name was Lubelia. So they called her Miss Bill.
Yeah.
Took me a while to figure that out.
She had set us to go to the store and get some bread. We'll go to the store and say, we want a loaf of white bread. And they had another name for it. So we were Miss Beale's grandkids.
Do you remember, for what year was Emmett Till killed? Do you remember hearing about that?
Yes.
Were the parents scared? Like, because you were living that same life.
Yeah, we did not go to the South after that for 2 years. Because, you know, it was a shock for me. I got on a bus with my cousins. And, you know, riding a bus here in Cleveland, you can sit down wherever you want to. And my cousin, Betty, when I sat down on the front seat, I used to love to sit in front seats in the bus. She almost snatched my arm out of place and dragged me back. She said, "Did you see that sign?" I said, "Yeah, but we don't have signs like that saying colored seating in the back." And going to department stores there, you had white and black water fountains. The white water fountains were regular water fountains. The black was a bucket with a dipper in it that you dip the water out and drink and hung up the dipper, which we didn't drink water in the store because everybody come in there and dipper, put it back in the water.
Ooh.
And it was, the South was just different to us.
Tell them about your peanut farmer uncle. I love that story.
He lived in Arkansas. We went to visit him, and so he was getting up to go dig peanuts. So, could I go? He said, yes. So he was getting up, putting on long sleeve shirts, gloves. It was about 80 degrees then. He put on a big sun hat, shorts and a t-shirt. He said, "You need to put on some more clothes." I said, "It's too hot out there." Once I got out there, I know why he put on all those clothes, because of the sun beating down on you, making you so hot. And learning to dig peanuts. You just gonna go hacking away. You have to put the pitchfork down there and turn them up. And after I messed up a few, he told me I can go back to the house. And my father's father, he raised turkeys. White turkeys. He said those are the dumbest birds in the world. And I found out that from him, he used to have a net in the yard where the turkeys were. I said, "Papa Frank, how come we have these?" He said, "Because they will stand up when they lay their eggs. And if they drop to the ground, they would break. So you have them, they walk through the net, so when they have the egg, it will just fall a short distance and won't break on the ground." So, okay.
Makes sense. Yeah. And you said that your great-grandfather was Dan?
Yeah, Dan.
And his, you said something about his oral history, is something.
Yep. His oral history is in the Smithsonian, And it's a narrative of a slave, narrative of a former slave. People from the Smithsonian went to Alabama in 1939 to do an oral history of slaves. At that time, Dan was about 92 because he lived to be 109. And the funny thing, going through ancestries, he lived with two of his brothers. And where he lived at, 1900 census said it was three African Americans, Negroes rather, living in the house. In the 1920
Probably 10.
census, not 10, it was 1920 census, said he think it's three mulattoes living in the house. And then 1940 census, it said it's either mulattoes or Chinese that live in the house. And these are the same three brothers that went from being Negroes to mulattoes to Chinese.
Oh man.
Dan lived to be 109 years old.
And what neighborhood in Cleveland? You said you went to John Adams, right?
Yeah, I was born and raised on 20th Street off of Central, down where the St. Vincent Charities Hospital, one of their parking lots, is where our house used to be. And at that time, they was expanding Charity Hospital. The urban renewal program was going through. They told my parents, you sell this house, and then we're going to do a new development, and you all can move in. New development never came about. A parking lot was there. So,
Where'd you guys go?
and he moved from there and went to the projects, Metropolitan Housing Projects. Lived there until I was in high school, and we moved off onto 128th off of St. Clair. And I suppose
Is that Colin?
yes. But once I graduated from junior high school, I got a special transfer to go to John Adams to take German because I didn't want to go to East Tech. I could walk there. I can see it from where we lived at in the projects. So I went to John Adams. So with the special transfer, wherever I moved in the city, I can still go to John Adams if I wanted to. So I stayed at John Adams and graduated from there.
You speak a little German still?
No. Funniest thing about that, my German teacher's name, Miss Bystricky, and she told me I was the only student she ever had that spoke German with a cowboy accent.
And tell me about learning to play basketball. How did that basketball sort of get started with you?
My older brothers, they played basketball. And I played football. But my mother would never sign the cards. Back then, you couldn't play unless your parents signed the cards to play. So I said, I'll take after them, but I really don't want to do this. And then going over to the rec center, we played basketball outside on concrete. And I got pretty good at it. So then that was there. I played then in junior high school and high school and 4 years in college. And after that, I played, I think, till I got 55 years old.
Because you played the A-League ball
Yeah.
in Cleveland for a few years.
So
And
what
I-
was that? What was that? What's the A-League?
I played with Akron Goodyears, which they was considered semi-pro, and I played with May Company's team. And then when they went out of business, started playing with the muni leagues around this city.
So this was a league of like corporate sponsored teams where you
Corporate sponsored team, yeah, like Akron Goodyears.
Yeah, and they would pay you couple bucks a game, or what would they pay? Is it not really?
No, you got tennis shoes and a suit, and maybe a meal.
Okay. Any other interesting basketball stories? You ever like play against anybody great? Like, who do you? Like,
Oh yeah.
well, first back up. How did you end up going from John Adams to Oklahoma Panhandle?
Got a scholarship out there.
Like, how did they find out about you? Like, how would they know?
At that time, they used to rank high school players. They had a book out, high school top 100s to look at, and I made that. And the coach from Oklahoma called me one day in Panhandle and said, "How would you like to come out here?" So I don't know. And then he told me to buy a Sports Illustrated. And that Sports Illustrated had about a 12-page article about Panhandle A&M College.
Really?
Yeah. And it said, all the kids that came out there, they had a horse, and you did this, and you did that. And I said, wow. And to get away from home. So I went out there for half a year. And I said, no.
So why didn't it work for you?
It was total culture shock. I went out there with city clothes. Khaki pants, hats, starred shirts. When I got out there, everybody wore blue jeans and cowboy boots. So, I wasn't hearing all of that. So,
What city was that?
in Goodwell, Oklahoma, is up in the Panhandle.
Goodwell.
It was 72 miles from Amarillo, Texas. And it was 11 miles from Guyman, Oklahoma.
So are you saying you were one of the top 100 players in Ohio or in your class, in the nation?
In the nation to look at.
And the best offer you got was for Oklahoma Panhandle?
Well, I thought I wanted to go someplace different. I got other offers.
Like, what about Oklahoma? Like, what about major school? Like, you weren't looking at any major school? Like, any big, deep, Division I schools? I know you
It
said
wasn't Division I back then.
Oh, it wasn't.
It was college division and small college division.
Okay.
And I got a scholarship to offer to Colgate, not knowing anything about Colgate. Being the guard from the team, we both got offers there.
Colgate's a really good school.
Yeah. And,
But
being from
Right.
the inner city,
Uh-huh.
and Donnie lived, at that time we called the slums, and Donnie said, Bourbon, did you get from Colgate? I said, yes. I'd never heard of a college named after any toothpaste. And Donnie said, neither have I, so we just said, Colgate is out. And we got, I think it was somewhere around 12 or 13 different scholarships. And then at that time, too many major colleges wasn't interested in black inner city kids.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to Oklahoma, didn't like it, and called back to Cleveland and talked to the coach from Baldwin Wallace. Asked him, was he still interested? And he said, when do you want to come? I said, I'll be there in school start in June.
So you playing basketball at Baldwin Wallace, did you start right away? What was your career like?
I played 1 year of junior varsity and my other 3 years of varsity. And 2.5 years of varsity I started.
You guys win any conference titles?
We won the Ohio Conference championship twice. And we lost to this guy in the semifinals of the College Division National Championship. His name was Earl Monroe.
You were in the college division. You were in the bigger division.
No, we was in the small college
Small
division.
college division. But you still made it to the semifinals?
Yeah, we played this
Earl?
guy named Earl LaPearl.
Yeah.
And we said, boy, these country guys coming out here, 5 of them came out with 5 different color warm-up uniforms on. So we said, oh boy, we're going to just wipe the floor with them because the game before, we played Mad Dog Carter. He played pro, and he went to Mount St. Mary. We set a record on them scoring. And then the following night, we played Winston-Salem. And if they had a three-point line, Earl Monroe would have had 70 points. He scored 41 points.
Did you go to any of these games? Did you didn't travel at all?
No.
Do you remember, like, was the team, like, on campus at Baltimore was known as, like, wow, they're really good? Like, was it, like, a thing?
Oh yeah. Basketball is very popular. Yeah.
Then we got our coach left. He became a president of a college. And the new coach came in, and him and I didn't hit it off because we played running basketball, and he wanted to slow it down and run plays, and I was kind of mouthy. So I got demoted from being a starter to 6-man coming off the bench, and we went up to play St. Bonaventure. And all week I was playing with the second team, and he called me and he called, Zeke, you're going to start tonight, and that's the guy you're going to check. Bob Lanier, standing in the doorway, kind of hunched over because he was too tall to stand in the doorway.
How did you do against them?
I fouled out. And I was so glad I fouled out because he was 6'11", he was 320 pounds, and I was 6'5", about 200. And he moved me around like I was a paper doll. And the coach said, make him go to his left. I said, but he's left-handed. I think Bob scored about, between Steve Mack and myself, I think Bob scored 50 points.
That's great. Sounds like you had basketball was good to you.
Yeah, it was good to me. And met a lot of people that I'm still friends with today. 4 of the guys that we started at BW, we're still friends today. 3 still live in Cleveland. And 1 lives out in, Ted lives in Colorado. A couple other starters, 1 live up in New York. Another one live in Florida. We get together.
You
Any
don't.
of that team in the Baltimore Sports Hall of Fame or anything? Is there a Sports Hall of Fame?
4 of the 5 starters was in their Hall of Fame.
Oh, yeah.
And they're still petitioning to get that whole team put in.
What were you gonna say?
I don't know. I forget.
That's great, guys. What were your siblings' names? And did you talk about your mom very much? I don't think. But you said she didn't have a job. But what?
No, she was a stay-at-home
What
mom.
do you remember about her?
Very strict. And you did what she said to do. With no back talk. I remember that she told my oldest brother not to smoke. And she was up at the market on 55th and Woodland. It was an outdoor market. She was getting some produce. And she saw him walk by, smoking a cigarette. And she come home, put on a pair of overalls, and he came home. And she said, I told you not to smoke and don't lie. And she said, you want to be treated like a man, I'm going to treat you like a man. Hit him once in the chest. I said, boy, I never want a cigarette. But she was very strict, and
What was your name?
Dorothy. And she knew they gave us homework. And in order for you to go outside to play, you have to have it done. And I used to do mine in study hall. Come home, I did it in study hall. She said, you're going to do some studying here before you go out. And like I told you earlier, my father was a construction worker. And we used to say he worked from light 30 to dark 30, 6 days a week.
What was his name?
Grady.
Great.
We had a lot of repeat names. My oldest brother was named Grady.
Yeah. What's the story behind the name Bourbon? Why they name you Bourbon? That's your given name, right?
Given name. And my mother told me I was named after one of my uncles. And doing my research, I haven't found that uncle yet. But maybe it was a nickname for him because my grandfather had 13 brothers and sisters, and my grandmother had 14 brothers and sisters. So maybe it was somebody in that bunch they called Bourbon. And so that was my given name.
So to wrap up, again, tell me how long you guys have been married, and then any advice that you would say to a
It'll
long
be
marriage.
47 years on Tuesday, the 17th, right? Well, I don't really like to give advice. I usually tell people things don't always go the way you want, but sometimes you just have to keep going, But I have found when we talk, we were talking about our childhood, and we played outside all the time. We were always outside. Our mothers weren't hovering around making sure that we weren't doing something we shouldn't, because eventually you were going to get caught anyway because people talk to one another. So one of my favorite childhood stories is our next door neighbors had a parrot, and eventually the parrot picked up my mother's voice and would call me. So I would hear what I thought was my mother, and I would come home, and she would look at me like, "Go outside, I'm not calling you." So that went on for a while. But I think that the things that I learned from my mom and dad was, hard work, do what you say you're supposed to do, and give back, because most of us have more than what we need. And those are lessons that I got from all sides of my family. And the music, even if you weren't a professional musician, my aunt and uncle sang in choirs. My brother retired from being a professional cellist and went on to join, sings in choirs. And I think that when you have that kind of background, you sort of learn that that's something you can take with you. And, I had a good childhood. I mean, we had fun. I had a grandma, my mother's mother, and I took a train trip to California when I was 10, because that's where her daughter and granddaughter and great-granddaughters had moved to. And so we went out there and spent almost all summer together. Grandma and I rode the train all the way across the country and back.
You asked
We had a
about
great time.
advice. You're going to have your ups and downs, and you make the best of it. Like my mother and father was married for 65 years.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at how they were, their life, and you look at it and say, it was a very good example they set for me. And so we're trying to be 65 years too, or better.
That at least seems like a long ways off.
I think that's great, guys. Unless
Okay.
there's something that you expected me. Oh, you know what? Alicia sent me an email. Let me make sure that she didn't send me. There's a couple notes maybe that she sent me.
She was worried that I'd send the strawberry shortcake pajama picture home with you.
Becky was talking about going outside and playing. Off of 37th and Woodland is this 37th Street Hill.
Okay. Yep.
Down by the market.
Yep.
And we used to go down there on Sundays and ride our bikes down 37th Street Hill. You can get up to about 50 miles an hour going down that hill. No helmet, no nothing. We used to ride down there. And then once I got grown, I went back down and rode down in my car. I said, well, we was just blooming crazy to ride down this hill on our bicycles. But it would be 10 or 15 of us. We'd go down there and ride. Parents didn't know about it, though. You'd go down and ride down 37th Street Hill.
We used to swim in Dome Brook by RX Middle.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's they say it's
Yeah.
totally not safe. We used to climb in this little hole, to get up on the waterfall. And there was a waterfall at one point. We would jump off the waterfall into the creek there. I think we hit everything that Alicia has on her list.
Oh, Alicia had a list. Of course she did.
One of the things Our favorite places to go play when I was younger was down at Kingsbury Run, where they had the Kingsbury murders.
I don't know about the Kingsbury murders.
Oh, Kingsbury murders is
What area is that? Woodland over in that
Woodland
way, isn't
over in Woodland, Kansman area.
Isn't that where that kind of a newer development is over there?
Yeah, but it's still where the railroads used to run. And they think it was a doctor used to go down there and mutilate hobos and cut up their bodies.
Yeah, you should look that up.
And
It's
they
pretty
found
interesting.
quite a few bodies down there, and to this day it's still unsolved.
Yes.
And we used to go down there and play. Parents didn't know about it, though. That was our favorite place to go play.
Wow.
We had what I say creek that ran through this little woods. It really was, so underneath the streets were these huge sewer pipes. Then, and if that wasn't a fun place to play, again, how many times did they tell us, don't do that, stay out of there? Because it could have been the sort of thing where if the water picked up at some point in time. But the goal, there was also a huge sled riding hill up above that. So the goal on sled riding was to get into the water. And if you came back up and you had broken through the ice and you were soaking wet, you and you would go home. I remember going home one day. I was soaking wet. It was snowing. It was cold. And, my mom just looked at me. She says, okay, go get in the bath, because I was so cold. But you don't know it when you're outside playing like that. And I think that you pass, our kids played up and down the street all the time.
We had this thing when we went outside to play. We used to go outside and play all day. You come home and eat lunch. One of the things, we had baseball games we played that would start maybe 8 o'clock in the morning. You had a break for lunch, and then you go back and play. Break for dinner, then it started getting dark. That game was over, and the next day. But one of the things I'd learned, people said, well, when did you know to go home? As my mother say, dark 30 is when you come home. What time is dark 30? You'll know if you don't make that time.
The only other thing Alicia had on her list was just like how her fond memories of your family barbecues. Like that's like a big thing.
Oh,
You
yeah.
guys doing your
Yeah.
barbecues.
Well, and we had a social club that we belonged to for a while that had barbecues every summer. But yeah, a lot of family cookouts. I think what was interesting about us marrying was the food, one thing. Chitlins. I don't eat chitlins. But, things like that where we learned about each other, and concerts and on my side and music lessons and stuff like that. And it works. It's interesting. It makes life way more interesting.
Well, we used to barbecue, my group. We did it all during the major holidays during the summer. And we had a thing, New Year's Day. No matter what the weather, we barbecued outside. And Becky I don't know if she still got the pictures of me and my brother-in-law outside with cold weather gear on, barbecuing. That was the thing
Snow.
we did. Snow. We barbecued doing it.
Bundled up.
And the other funny thing, Becky came over, took over my parents. We had dinner. And Becky said, how come your mother's serving cake with dinner? I said, yeah, no cake. She said, right. I said, no, that's cornbread, Becky. It was puffed up like it was a sheet cake. I said, no, that's cornbread.
Oh, that's great, guys. All right, do you have some pictures for me?